Ethan stood at the edge of the wide forest, looking at the tall trees that touched the blue sky above the planet Silveris. He was a young man from Earth, wearing simple clothes and a curious look on his face. It was his first day on this new world, and everything felt different. The sunlight was brighter than on Earth, shining down with strong warmth that made the green leaves glow. Ethan felt excited and a little nervous about what he would find. His team had landed early that morning to explore and learn about the people who lived on Silveris. Ethan had heard many things about the elf-like people here. They were known for their long, pointed ears, their bright eyes, and their graceful movements. The people called themselves Silverians. Their skin was soft and pale, and they loved the shade of the forests. It was said that the sunlight here could hurt them, so they rarely went out during the day. Most visitors wore special suits, but Ethan decided to walk outside without any protection, just like he did on Earth. As Ethan walked into a sunlit clearing, he noticed some Silverian girls watching him from under the shade of a large tree. There were 3 of them, and they looked about his age. One girl had long silver hair, and her name was Lyra. Her friends were Myra, who had short golden hair, and Syrah, who had a gentle voice. They were curious and a little afraid as they watched Ethan step into the light none of them had ever seen. Someone walk in the open sun without any worry. Ethan waved at them and smiled. He could see the surprise in their eyes. Lyra whispered to her friends, and they watched as Ethan took off his jacket and let the sun touch his arms. The sunlight was strong, but it did not hurt him. He even closed his eyes and lifted his face to the sky, enjoying the warmth. The Silverian girls gasped softly. Lyra took a step forward but stopped at the edge of the shade. She was not brave enough to join him. Myra spoke quietly to Syrah, asking if Ethan was using some kind of magic. Syrah shook her head and said she did not know. All 3 girls had been taught to stay out of the sun. Their parents told them stories about how even a short time in the sunlight could burn their skin or make them sick. But here was a human who seemed to enjoy the light. The girls were amazed and confused. Ethan did not know what the girls were saying, but he could guess. He looked at them and said in a gentle voice, "It's all right. The sunlight feels nice. On my world, we go out in the sun every day." He stretched his arms and smiled. Lyra looked at him with wide eyes. She had never seen anyone so calm in the sunlight. Soon, more Silverian children came to see the human who walked in the sun. They hid behind bushes and trees, peeking out to watch. Some of them whispered to each other, wondering if Ethan was really safe. A few of the older boys frowned and looked jealous. They could never do what Ethan was doing. Lyra's father, an elder of their village, came to see what was happening. He was surprised to see Ethan standing in the clearing. Looking healthy and strong, the elder asked Ethan if he felt any pain from the sun. Ethan shook his head and explained, "On Earth, our skin is made to handle sunlight. We even need it to stay healthy. It helps our bodies in many ways." The elder listened with interest, and the younger elves watched closely. Lyra moved a little closer, still staying in the shade. She wanted to ask more, but she was shy. As the day went on, the news about the Sunwalker spread through the village. Many Silverian girls wanted to see the human with their own eyes. Some asked Lyra what she thought of Ethan. She told them she was amazed and wanted to learn more about him. Lyra felt a strange hope inside her heart. Maybe, she thought, there was something special about this visitor. Ethan did not try to show off. He just wanted to make friends. He told stories about his home and answered the elves' questions as best as he could. The Silverian girls listened closely, their eyes shining with wonder. Lyra asked him if all humans could walk in the sun. Ethan nodded and said, "Yes, it is normal for us." When the sun began to set, the Silverians returned to their homes. Lyra and her friends stayed for a moment, watching Ethan as he packed his things. She smiled at him and said, "Thank you for showing us something new." Ethan waved goodbye, feeling happy. He did not know what would happen next, but he was glad to have met the elf girls. In the quiet evening light, Lyra whispered to herself that this was only the beginning of a new story for their people. Ethan woke up early the next morning, feeling full of energy. The light from the sun came through his window, making the room bright. He looked outside and saw the green forest shining in the morning sun. Birds sang in the trees and the air was fresh and warm. Ethan was excited to learn more about Silveries and its people. He walked outside, choosing a path that led toward the village. As he stepped into the sunlight, he saw the Silverian girls from yesterday waiting for him. Lara smiled when she saw him. Myra waved and Sira gave a small, shy smile. Ethan smiled back, feeling happy to see friendly faces. Lyra walked over to Ethan, but she stopped at the edge of the shade. She said softly, "Good morning, Ethan. We have talked about you all night." "Everyone wants to know how you can walk in the sun," Myra nodded and said. "Some people think you are magic." Sira said, "We want to learn your secret. How are you not afraid?" Ethan laughed kindly and said, "There is no secret. My body is just different. On my planet, we play and work in the sun every day. It makes us strong and healthy. We even get sad if we do not see the sun for a long time." Lyra's eyes grew wide. She looked at her friends, who seemed just as surprised. Myra said, "We are not like that. We get sick from the sun. That is why we build our homes under the trees. The elders say it has always been this way." Sira looked at Ethan and asked, "Does it hurt if you stay in the sun too long?" Ethan nodded and explained, "If I stay too long, I can get sunburn and it hurts, but it does not happen quickly." "My skin can heal," Lyra wanted to know more. She asked Ethan to show them how he could move in the sun. Ethan stepped out from the trees into a big patch of sunlight. He stretched his arms and turned around slowly, letting the sun touch his face and hands. The girls watched with amazement. They covered their eyes a little as if the light was too bright for them. Soon, other Silverian children came to watch. Some of the young elf boys did not believe what they saw and dared each other to try stepping into the sun. One brave boy named Talon put his hand out into the sunlight and quickly pulled it back, rubbing his skin. He said, "It burns even a little." The children started calling Ethan the Sunwalker. They followed him around, asking questions and trying to get close, though they stayed in the shade. Ethan was invited to a small gathering in the village. The Silverians wanted to talk to him and see if he could teach them his secret. The elders came too, their faces serious. Lyra and Myra led Ethan to a shaded area under a big old tree. Everyone sat in a circle, and Ethan was asked to sit in the middle where the sunlight touched the ground. He felt a little nervous but also honored. The eldest elf, called Elder Yorn, spoke. He said, "Ethan, we see you walk in the sun. Our people cannot do this. Is there something you can give us to help?" Ethan shook his head gently and said, "I wish I could help. It is not something you can learn in a day. My people were born this way. Maybe our worlds are just different." Some elves looked disappointed, but others were still curious. Lyra asked Ethan about his family and what people did for fun on Earth. Ethan told simple stories about swimming, hiking, and playing sports under the sun. He spoke about summer days, parks, and picnics. The elves listened closely, surprised that people could live with so much sunlight. After the meeting, Lyra and her friends walked with Ethan. They talked about their own lives, telling him how they studied in schools built deep under the trees and how their festivals happened only at night or in the early morning. Lyra invited Ethan to visit their learning hall, a place where young elves were taught about plants, music, and art. Ethan agreed, happy to learn more. At the learning hall, the young elves gathered around Ethan, whispering and staring. Some asked him to touch a flower that grew in the sunlight, hoping he could make it glow like he did in the clearing. Ethan laughed and touched the flower, but nothing happened. He said, "I am just a person like you." As the sun moved higher in the sky, Ethan sat with Lyra, Myra, and Sarah in the cool shade. They shared fruit and told each other about their dreams. Lyra said she wished she could stand in the sun, even just for a little while, without pain. Myra hoped one day to see Ethan's world. Sira just wanted everyone to be friends. The day ended with new questions and more wonder. The elf girls watched Ethan as he walked back to his home, sunlight shining all around him. They felt hope and curiosity in their hearts, and they knew their lives were starting to change. Ethan woke up feeling happy because he had made new friends. He remembered how the elf girls Lyra, Myra, and Syrah had watched him with wide eyes as he walked in the sunlight. It made him feel special, but he also wanted to help them understand that he was just a normal person. As he walked outside, he saw Lyra waiting for him near the edge of the trees. She waved at him and he walked over with a smile. Lyra looked a little nervous, but excited. She asked Ethan if he wanted to visit a special place in their village. Ethan nodded, wanting to learn more about how the elves lived. As they walked, Myra and Syrah joined them, and soon they reached a small building made from living trees and flowers. The air was cool and filled with the sweet smell of leaves. Lyra told Ethan this was the place where young elves learned how to hide from the sun and take care of their skin inside. Some elf children sat on the floor, listening to an elder named Elder Nellen. She was teaching them about the dangers of sunlight. When she saw Ethan, her eyes grew wide, but she welcomed him kindly. Lyra asked Elder Nellen if Ethan could show the children how he could stand in the sun. The elder agreed, but looked a little worried. Ethan stepped into a patch of sunlight coming through the window. The elf children gasped and stared at him. Some of them whispered to each other, while others hid their faces. Ethan smiled gently and said, "It's okay, I am used to the sunlight. On my world, all people can do this." He stood there for a while, moving his hands and showing his skin was fine. One little elf girl was very curious. She asked if she could touch Ethan's arm. She reached out slowly and touched his hand. The other children watched, amazed that nothing happened. Elder Nellen told them that everyone was different, and it was important to respect that. Ethan said he wanted to be friends and learn from the elves, just as they wanted to learn from him. After the lesson, Lyra and her friends talked to Ethan outside. They asked many questions about his world. Myra wanted to know what food humans ate, and Syrah asked if Ethan ever got scared of anything. Ethan answered with stories about his family and friends back on Earth. He said he sometimes felt afraid of new things, but meeting kind people helped him feel better. As they talked, some of the older elves watched from a distance. They were curious but also a little worried. They whispered about how Ethan's ability might change their village. Some elves thought it was dangerous for the young ones to see a human walk in the sun. Others believed it could help their people find new ways to live. Later that day, Elder Yorn called a meeting with the village council. Lyra's father was part of the council, and he wanted to hear what everyone thought. Some elders said Ethan was welcome, but they should be careful not to change their old ways too quickly. Other elves, mostly the younger ones, were excited to learn more about humans and their world. Lyra spoke up and said that meeting Ethan had made her feel hopeful for the future. Ethan listened quietly to the elves. He did not want to cause trouble. He said, "I am just a visitor. I want to be your friend and learn about your life. I do not want to make you change if you are not ready." The elders thanked Ethan for his honesty, but they still looked thoughtful after the meeting. Myra asked Ethan if he could teach her and Lyra how to be less afraid of the sun. Ethan thought for a moment and said, "It might take a long time, but maybe you can start by spending a few seconds in the sunlight each day." Myra looked unsure, but Lyra smiled and said she wanted to try. The next morning, Ethan met Lyra and Myra at the edge of the trees. The sunlight was bright, but a soft wind made the air cool. Lyra took a deep breath and stepped out into the light, just for a moment. She closed her eyes, then quickly ran back to the shade. Myra tried too, and even though it was scary, she felt proud of herself. Ethan cheered for them and told them they were very brave. The news about Lyra and Myra's bravery spread quickly. More young elves wanted to try, and soon, small groups of children were taking tiny steps into the sun, always with Ethan nearby. The elders watched carefully, but they could see that the young elves were happy and safe. As the days passed, Ethan became even closer to his new friends. He learned about their music, stories, and the games they played in the moonlight. Lyra and Myra were thankful for Ethan's kindness. They told him that even though their bodies were different, their hearts wanted the same things: friendship, hope, and a chance to see the world in a new way. Ethan looked at the sun setting behind the tall trees and felt happy. He knew that meeting the elf girls and showing them the sunlight was the beginning of something special for everyone. Lyra sat with her friends under the large old tree near the edge of the village. The sunlight shined bright on the grass, but they stayed in the shade as usual. They talked about Ethan and all the things he could do in the sunlight. Myra was still amazed at how he did not get hurt. Shira was quiet but listened carefully to every word. Around them, other elves talked about Ethan too. Some were curious while some felt worried. Rumors spread quickly in the village. Some elves began to whisper that Ethan had magic powers. They said maybe he was sent from the stars to change their world. Older elves shook their heads and told the young ones not to trust things they did not understand. They remembered the old stories that warned about people who tried to change their ways. A few elves even said Ethan should not be allowed to walk around so freely. But many others, especially the young elves, wanted to learn more about him. Lyra heard these stories and felt a mix of hope and fear. She liked Ethan and thought he was kind. She wanted her people to learn from him, not to be afraid. Myra told her that they should show the others that Ethan was not dangerous. The three friends decided to visit Elder Yorn and talk to him. The elder listened to the girls as they told him about Ethan. Lyra said, "He is not magic. He is just different from us. He wants to help and learn about our ways." Myra nodded and said, "He taught us not to be afraid of things that are new." Elder Yorn looked thoughtful. He said, "Change is not easy for our people, but we must listen and learn before we decide." Meanwhile, Ethan did his best to show respect for the elves and their customs. He tried to help with small tasks in the village. He listened to their music and tried their food. The elves saw that he was polite and wanted to be a good friend. Still, some people watched him with worried eyes, and a few avoided him completely. One day, while Ethan helped the elves gather fruit, an old woman approached him. She asked, "Why do you not fear the sun?" Ethan smiled and said, "On my world, the sun helps us live. We use it to grow food and stay strong. I'm not special. All humans are like this." The old woman nodded slowly. She did not say more, but she watched Ethan with less fear in her eyes. That evening, Lyra told Ethan about an old legend. She said, "Long ago, there was a story about a visitor from another world. The story says this person would walk in the sun and help our people find a new path. Some elves believe you might be this visitor." Ethan was surprised. He said, "I'm just Ethan. I want to be your friend and learn together. I am not a hero." Lyra smiled at him. She said, "Sometimes it is not magic or legends. Sometimes it is just a person who shows us something new." Myra and Sira agreed. They said that since Ethan had come, more young elves wanted to try new things. Even small steps into the sunlight were a big change for them, but not everyone was happy about these changes. One night, a group of older elves spoke at the council meeting. They said that the young elves were becoming too bold and forgetting their traditions. They worried that their children would get hurt if they spent time in the sun. Elder Yorn listened and promised to watch carefully, but he also said, "We should not fear what we do not understand. Let us learn first, then decide." Lyra felt nervous after the meeting, but Ethan tried to comfort her. He said, "I do not want to make trouble for your people. If you want, I can leave the village for a while." Lyra shook her head. "You have helped us see the sun differently. I think we should try to learn together." The next morning, Lyra invited Ethan to a secret place deep in the forest. She wanted to show him the old carvings on the stones there. The carvings told stories of the elves and the sun. Some carvings showed elves hiding in the shade, but others showed figures walking in the light. Lyra said, "These stories are very old. Maybe our people were not always afraid of the sun." Ethan looked at the carvings and felt hopeful. He said, "Maybe you are right. Maybe your people can learn to be strong in the sun again." Lyra smiled, and together they sat quietly, thinking about what might come next. That evening, Lyra, Mayra, and Sarah walked together, talking about everything that had happened. They wondered what the elders would decide and if the old stories could help their people. As they reached the village, they saw children playing near the edge of the sunlight. For the first time, some of them dared to reach their hands into The warm light, laughing together, Ethan watched from a distance, feeling proud of his friends. He hoped the village would find peace and a new way to live, one where no one had to be afraid of the sunlight or of each other. The day started cool, but the sun soon rose high above the green trees. Ethan stood with Lyra, Myra, and Sarah near the edge of the village, looking up at the distant mountain. The mountain was covered with bright stones that sparkled in the sunlight. It was called the Holy Mountain by the elves, and very few had ever gone near its top. The sunlight was strongest there, and the elves believed old secrets were kept inside the temple at the mountain's peak. Lyra held a small bag with food and water for the trip. She looked nervous but also excited. Myra was quiet, her eyes wide, as she thought about what they might find. Sarah carried a small book to write down what happened. Ethan was ready to help them and hoped to show the elves that new things could be learned. Alex, another human from the exploration team, joined them for the journey. He was friendly and strong, and the elves liked him because he always listened. Alex smiled and said, "Let's take it slow and watch out for each other." The group set off, walking through the forest path. As they walked, the sunlight shone through the leaves. Lyra and Myra moved quickly from one shadow to the next, staying out of the bright light. Ethan and Alex walked in the sun without trouble, sometimes helping their friends by blocking the sunlight with their bodies. They saw birds flying above, and once a small animal ran across the path, making everyone laugh. The path grew rocky and steep as they climbed higher. Lyra grew tired, but she wanted to reach the temple. She remembered the old stories about the place and wondered if there were answers there. Myra slipped once on a loose stone, but Ethan caught her and helped her to her feet. Sarah drew pictures of the trees and rocks in her book. Wanting to remember every part of the journey, they stopped to rest under a large rock that made a cool shade. Lyra shared fruit with everyone, and Alex told stories about climbing mountains on Earth. The elves listened closely, amazed by how humans could climb so many places and see so many things. Myra asked Ethan if he was afraid of the mountain. Ethan said, "Everyone is a little afraid when they try something new, but it is good to be brave together." Soon, they reached the start of the rocky trail that led to the temple. The sun was strong here, and the stones were warm. Lyra took a deep breath and followed Ethan, stepping out into the sunlight for just a few seconds before running to the next bit of shade. Myra and Sarah did the same, each time going a little farther before needing to stop. Alex carried their bags so they could move more easily. At last, the group reached the temple ruins at the top of the mountain. The temple was made of white stone that shined in the sunlight. Old carvings covered the walls. Lyra's hands shook as she touched the stone, feeling the heat from the sun. She read the words on the wall, slowly saying them out loud for everyone to hear. The old writings spoke of change and bravery. They told a story about a time when elves and humans both lived on Silverus, long ago. The story said that the elves once learned from humans how to live with the sun. Over many years, they forgot and grew afraid again. Lyra read, "The light is not only danger, but hope. Those who walk together will find a new path." Myra wrote down the words in Sarah's book. The friends sat together, thinking about what the story meant. Ethan felt proud that he could help, but he also understood the elves' fear. He said, "Maybe you do not need to stop being careful, but you can learn to take small steps like we did today." As they sat at the top of the mountain, Lyra felt the sun on her skin and did not feel so afraid. She looked at Ethan and Alex and she smiled. She said, "I think our people can change if we help each other." The group rested before starting the trip down the mountain. On the way, they helped each other across the rocks and through the bright patches of sunlight. Lyra and Myra talked about sharing the old story with the village elders. They wanted everyone to know that the sun could be both a challenge and a gift. When they reached the village, the news of their journey spread quickly. Young elves gathered to hear about the temple and the writings. Lyra showed them the words she found, and Myra read from Sarah's book. The old and young elves listened closely. Some were still afraid, but others felt hope for the first time. That night, Lyra and Ethan sat under the stars. Lyra thanked him for helping her face her fear. She said, maybe tomorrow, more of us will try to stand in the sun, even for just a little while. Ethan smiled and told her, one step at a time is all it takes to start something new. As the village slept, the hope for change grew stronger in every heart. The village woke early the next morning, and everyone felt the change in the air. News about the journey to the mountain and the old writings from the temple traveled quickly. Many elves gathered in the main square, wanting to hear the full story. From Lyra, Myra, Sira, and the two humans. Some of the elders sat together, looking serious, while young elves whispered and looked at the sunlight shining between the trees. Ethan and Alex stood with Lyra and her friends in front of the village council. Elder Yorn raised his hand for silence and asked Lyra to share what they had found. Lyra spoke clearly, though her voice shook a little at first. She told everyone about the carvings on the mountain, about the story of elves and humans living together long ago, and about how the sun could be both a danger and a gift. Myra read the words they had copied, and Sira showed her drawings of the old temple and the sunlight falling on the white stones. Some elves listened with hope, while others shook their heads. One old elf named Alden said, "We have always feared the sun. It has hurt us for so long. Why should we risk it now?" But a younger elf, Talon, answered, "Because now we know we are not alone. Maybe we can learn, even if it takes a long time." Ethan spoke softly to the group. He said, "On my world, we learn to live with the sun by being careful. We use clothes, hats, and special lotions to protect ourselves. Maybe your people can find new ways step by step. It is not about changing everything at once, but about being brave together." A long talk began. Elders argued, and young elves shared their hopes and fears. Lyra and Myra said they wanted to try standing in the sunlight even for just a short time every day. Sira said she would draw pictures to help young elves see the beauty in the sun, not just the danger. Alex promised to bring some things from his ship that might help, like light cloths and special creams that protected human skin. After many hours, Elder Yorn stood and said, "We will not force anyone to do what they fear. But if some want to try, we will let them. We will watch carefully and learn. If there is hope, let it grow with care." That afternoon, a group of young elves gathered with Lyra, Myra, Sira, Ethan, and Alex near the edge of the trees. The sunlight was warm, and the shadows lay long on the grass. Lyra took a deep breath, then stepped into the sun for a few seconds, her face calm. Myra followed, holding Lyra's hand. Sira was nervous, but let the light touch her fingers. The other elves watched in silence. Some tried it themselves, staying only a moment in the light before running back to the shade. Talon cheered for his friends and tried to stand in the sun a little longer each time. Ethan and Alex smiled, offering hats and soft cloths for those who wanted them. A few older elves stayed away, watching from a distance. They did not speak, but their faces showed worry and surprise. Elder Yorn stood with the others, and when the youngest elves took their first steps into the light, he nodded, saying quietly, "This is new, but not wrong." Over the next few days, the elves talked about the changes. Some were afraid, but many felt hope growing inside them. Children asked to go outside for lessons in the morning when the sun was not as strong. Lyra and Myra led the first group, showing them how to stay safe and not to rush. Ethan and Alex taught them about making hats and finding the right times to be in the sun. Sira filled her book with drawings of the elves in sunlight, showing happy faces and small victories. Her pictures helped everyone remember that change was possible, even if it was slow. One morning, Lara's father, who had once worried the most, joined his daughter in the sun for a short walk. He smiled at her and said, "I see now that we can be careful and brave at the same time." Lyra felt proud and hugged her father. As the days passed, more elves started try standing in the sun. The village felt different, lighter, and more open. Even the old stories began to change. Children asked their parents about the ancient days when elves and humans lived together, and parents no longer said it was impossible. Ethan felt happy to see his friends grow stronger and more confident. He knew there would still be worries and old fears, but now the elves had hope and new dreams. Lyra and Myra became leaders among the young elves, always ready to help others try something new. One evening, as the sun set, Ethan sat with Lyra, Myra, and Scylla by the river. They watched the last light touch the water and talked about all they had learned together. Lyra said, "Our world is changing, and it is because we met you." Ethan smiled and said, "It is because you were brave enough to try." The village, once afraid of the sun, was slowly learning to welcome its light. The future felt bright for everyone. The sun rose slowly over the village, spreading golden light across the green forest and the quiet homes of the elves. Ethan stood outside, watching the sun rise higher every minute. It had been many days since the first brave elves stepped into the sunlight, and now the village felt different in many ways. More children played in the morning, and laughter could be heard where there used to be only careful steps in the shade. Lyra walked over to Ethan, her face bright with hope. She was wearing a simple hat that Ethan had made for her, and she held a cloth in her hand to cover her arms if the sun felt too strong. Lyra smiled and said, "Today is the day we try again. More elves want to join us." Ethan felt proud of his friend and nodded, ready to help. All around the village, small groups gathered near the edges of the shade. Myra and Scylla stood with some younger elves, helping them feel safe. Alex brought more hats and cloths from the human ship, and he taught the elves how to use them. Some older elves watched quietly, but they did not stop the others. Even Elder Yorn was there, standing with his arms crossed, but his eyes were soft and full of thought. The first group stepped out into the light just a little bit. Children giggled and called to each other, testing how long they could stay before running back to the shade. Lyra led the way, standing in the sun for a whole minute. Myra followed her, and Scylla cheered for her friends. Ethan and Alex walked beside them, always ready to help if someone felt afraid or needed to rest. As the days passed, the elves became braver. They learned when the sunlight was softest and how to use the things Ethan and Alex had brought to keep their skin safe. Some elves even started working outside during the early morning, and families gathered for small picnics where the sunlight touched the grass. The old fears did not go away completely, but they did not control the elves anymore. Ethan saw that the village was changing in other ways too. The elves were curious about human life, and they wanted to know more about Earth. Lyra asked Ethan questions about his family, his home, and his favorite places. Myra wanted to learn human songs, and Scylla loved to draw pictures of everything new she saw. Alex taught the elves how to use small tools and helped them build a new bench where people could sit together in the sun. One evening, Elder Yorn called another meeting in the main square. This time, the sunlight reached the center of the square, and no one moved the meeting to the deep shade. The elder spoke about all that had changed. He said, "We have learned that the sun is not only something to fear. With care and courage, we can find new ways to live." The young elves cheered, and some of the old ones smiled quietly. Lyra stood up and spoke to everyone. She said, "Ethan showed us a new path, but it was our choice to follow it. We are still elves, but now we are not so afraid. We are stronger together." Myra thanked Ethan and Alex for helping them and for being good friends after the meeting. The elves celebrated with music and food. For the first time, they danced in a place where the sunlight touched the ground. Children laughed and played, and even the shyest elves tried stepping out for a few moments. Ethan watched the joy on everyone's faces and felt a deep happiness. As the festival ended, Lyra and Ethan walked together to a quiet spot at the edge of the village. The first stars were coming out, and the last light of the sun touched the trees. Lyra said softly, "I never thought our world could change so much. Thank you for believing in us." Ethan shook his head and replied, "You believed in yourself. That is what made everything possible." Lyra smiled and reached for Ethan's hand. She said, "I hope our people will always remember this. The sun is not our enemy, it is part of our world." Ethan agreed, and they stood quietly, watching the sky grow dark and the stars appear. From that day on, the elves and humans shared more than just stories and songs. They learned from each other, and the village grew stronger. The sun, once feared by the elves, became a symbol of hope and friendship. Children grew up learning that it was possible to try new things. and that courage and kindness could change the world. Ethan knew he would return to Earth one day, but he also knew he would always remember Silverus, Lyra, and the brave elves who faced the sunlight. As the village rested in the cool night, a new story had begun, one of trust, friendship, and the bright light of a better future.